The obese girl finally broke down, crying. The mountain man was the only one who didn't turn away. The autumn sun hung low over the Cumberland Gap in 1794, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn settlement that folks had taken to calling Harlan's Ridge. It wasn't much, maybe 30 families scattered across the hollows and ridges of what would someday be eastern Kentucky, all trying to carve out lives in a wilderness that didn't give up its bounty easily. Martha Hensley knew about things that didn't give easily. At 19 years old, she carried more than just the water buckets from the creek each morning. She carried the weight of every sideways glance, every whispered comment, every young man who'd looked past her as if she were invisible. In a settlement where survival often meant going hungry, Martha's substantial frame marked her as different, as other, as somehow failing to fit the harsh requirements of frontier life. Lord have mercy! How does she get enough to eat when the rest of us are scraping by? Mrs. Pritchard's voice carried across the settlement commons that October morning, not quite quiet enough. Martha pretended not to hear, focusing on the heavy buckets she carried. Her mother had been the same build. She knew, strong, solid, capable of bearing children and hardship with equal fortitude. But her mother had died 3 winters back, leaving Martha alone with her father, a bitter man who'd taken to drink after losing his wife. "Martha, them buckets better be full this time." Her father's voice cracked across the morning air like a whip. She hurried her pace, water sloshing over the bucket rims, soaking her already stained dress. The other young women of the settlement gathered near the meeting house, their slim figures wrapped in threadbare but clean linsey-woolsey, their laughter like wind chimes in the crisp air. Sarah Carmichael, all golden curls and rosebud lips, caught Martha's eye and looked away, whispering something to the girl beside her. Martha felt the familiar burn behind her eyes but blinked it back. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. Not here, not where weakness meant becoming prey to the cruelty that frontier life seemed to sharpen in people rather than dull. The day stretched long, as days did when you were alone, even in a crowd. Martha worked in her father's garden plot, pulling the last of the turnips and carrots before the hard frost came. She worked in the small cabin, scrubbing clothes against the washboard until her knuckles bled. She worked in silence, in solitude, in the peculiar prison of being visible yet unseen. It was near dusk when the stranger rode into the settlement. He came from the mountain pass to the east, sitting easy on a rangy Appaloosa mare that looked like she'd seen as much country as her rider. The man himself was a sight that made folks stop and stare, not because he was handsome in any conventional way, but because he was simply more than ordinary life seemed to allow. Tall, broad across the shoulders, with hair the color of weathered oak tied back with a leather cord. His beard was full but trimmed close, and his buckskin showed the careful maintenance of a man who understood that his gear was his lifeline. "Evening," he called out in a voice like distant thunder, addressing no one in particular and everyone at once. "Name's Caleb Morgan, looking for a place to winter over if there's room." Samuel Harlan, who'd founded the settlement and still acted as its unofficial leader, stepped forward. "We don't turn away honest folks, stranger, long as they're willing to work and willing to defend what's ours if trouble comes calling. You running from anything we should know about?" Caleb Morgan's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "No more than any man, I reckon. Been trapping up north of here. Figured to spend the cold months somewhere with actual walls and neighbors within shouting distance." Martha watched from the doorway of her father's cabin, fascinated despite herself. Men like this passed through from time to time, mountain men, long hunters, scouts who knew the wild places like other men knew their own gardens. They never stayed long. The settlement was too tame, too settled, too bound by the small rules that let people live together without killing each other. "Got skills besides trapping?" Harlan asked. "Can work wood, leather, iron if you've got a forge. Can hunt, obviously. Can read and cipher some if that's useful." Caleb's eyes swept the settlement, taking in everything with the quick assessment of a man who'd learned to evaluate danger before it showed its teeth. His gaze passed over Martha, then stopped, came back. For a moment, just a moment, their eyes met. He didn't look away, didn't let his expression shift into that peculiar mix of pity and distaste she'd learned to expect. He just looked at her the way he'd looked at everything else, taking in information, making assessments, moving on. It shouldn't have mattered. It was nothing, really, but Martha felt something crack open inside her chest, some small space she'd kept sealed tight to protect it from the constant disappointment of the world. The settlement found Caleb Morgan useful enough to let him stay. He took up residence in an abandoned lean-to on the edge of the commons and set to work with the quiet efficiency of a man who'd learned not to waste motion. He fixed things, doors that wouldn't hang right, chimneys that smoked, axes that needed proper tempering. He brought in meat when hunting parties came back empty-handed, his long rifle speaking with deadly accuracy, and he didn't talk much, which suited Martha fine since she didn't either. She noticed him, though, noticed the way he moved, like the mountains themselves had taught him their patient, enduring strength. Noticed the way he treated the settlement's children with gruff kindness, carving small toys from scrap wood in the evenings. Noticed the way Sarah Carmichael and the other young women of the settlement began finding reasons to walk past his lean-to, their laughter a little louder, their glances a little longer. Caleb treated them with the same polite distance he treated everyone else. He didn't seem to notice or care that Sarah was beautiful, that Mary Pritchard had brought him fresh bread 3 times in a week, that every unmarried woman in the settlement had suddenly developed an urgent need for something repaired. Winter came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with teeth of ice and claws of wind. The settlement hunkered down, families drawing close around their fires, venturing out only when necessary. Food grew scarce. The hunting parties that did go out came back with little to show for their efforts. It was during one of these lean times that Martha's father sent her to trade for cornmeal at the settlement's common store. She wrapped herself in her mother's old cloak, the only one large enough to fit her, and made her way through knee-deep snow to the log building that served as trading post and gathering place. Inside, a group of women clustered near the fire, their voices low but animated. Martha recognized them all, the settlement's social arbiters, the ones who decided who belonged and who didn't, who was worthy and who wasn't. "Simply indecent the way she eats," Mrs. Pritchard was saying, "in times like these when children are going hungry. My mother says her own mother was the same way," Sarah Carmichael added, her pretty face pinched with something ugly. "Bad blood," she says. "Shouldn't be allowed to—" They saw Martha then, standing in the doorway, snow melting in pools around her feet. The silence was worse than their words had been. Mrs. Pritchard recovered first, her face hardening into righteous certainty. "Well, I suppose you heard all that, didn't you?" Martha's throat closed. She wanted to speak, wanted to defend herself, wanted to scream that she worked as hard as anyone, that she ate no more than her fair share, that she couldn't help the way her body held onto every scrap of sustenance, as if preparing for a famine that never came. But the words died before reaching her lips. "Nothing to say for yourself?" Sarah's voice dripped with false sweetness. "No wonder no man will have you. Who wants a wife who'll eat them out of house and home?" Something inside Martha broke, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet final snapping of the last thread that had been holding her together. The tears she'd held back for so long came flooding out, hot and unstoppable, running down her cheeks in streams that blurred her vision and choked her breath. She turned and fled, stumbling through the snow, blind with tears and shame and a grief so profound it felt like dying. She ran without thinking, without planning, just needing to be away, to be anywhere but there, anywhere but seen and judged and found wanting. She didn't see where she was going until strong hands caught her arms, steadying her before she could fall headlong into a snowdrift. "Whoa there," Caleb Morgan's deep voice rumbled. "Easy now." Martha tried to pull away, mortified that he, of all people, should see her like this, crying, broken, pathetic. But his grip was gentle and firm, keeping her upright until her legs remembered how to hold her weight. I'm sorry," she gasped between sobs. "Please, I just need to—" "Need to what? Freeze to death in a snowbank?" His tone was matter-of-fact rather than cruel. "Come on, my lean-to's closest." "No, I can't. People will keep their damn mouths shut if they know what's good for them." He was already guiding her toward his shelter, one large hand on her elbow. "You're half frozen and crying hard enough to choke. We're fixing that first. Then you can worry about what people think." His lean-to was surprisingly warm, a small fire burning in a carefully constructed stone hearth. He sat her down on a log bench near the fire and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders without asking permission or making a fuss about it. Then he poured something from a clay jug into a tin cup and pressed it into her hands. "Drink. It's just hot water with some honey and herbs. Nothing that'll hurt you." Martha drank because it was easier than arguing, and because the warmth of it seemed to loosen the terrible tightness in her chest. Caleb settled himself on another log across the fire, giving her space, but not absence. "You want to talk about it?" he asked after a long silence. "No." Her voice came out rough, scraped raw by crying. "Fair enough." He picked up a piece of wood and a knife, began carving with the idle skill of someone who'd spent countless hours doing exactly this. "You don't have to, but I'm here if you change your mind." The kindness of it, the simple, uncomplicated kindness, made fresh tears spill down Martha's cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you being nice to me?" Caleb looked up from his carving, his weathered face thoughtful. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because I'm—" She couldn't say it, couldn't voice the thing everyone saw when they looked at her. "Because you're what? A woman having a hard day?" He shook his head. "I've been all over this country, Martha Hensley. Met all kinds of folks. The ones who deserve kindness ain't always the ones who get it, and the ones who get it don't always deserve it. But near as I can tell, you work hard, you don't cause trouble, and you've been getting kicked by people who ought to know better. That about sum it up?" Martha stared at him. "You know my name." "'Course I do. I know everyone's name in the settlement. part of learning a place is learning its people." He went back to his carving. "Now, you can sit there till you're warm and ready to face the world again. No rush, no expectations, just warmth and quiet, which seems like what you need right now." So Martha sat. The fire crackled. The knife whispered against wood, and slowly, gradually, the terrible tightness in her chest began to ease. "They said," she began, then stopped. "I heard what they said," Caleb interrupted, his voice mild, but carrying an edge that reminded Martha he was a man who'd survived alone in the wilderness. "I was coming back from checking my traps, heard the whole sorry mess through the store walls. It's true, though, I am—" She gestured helplessly at herself. Everyone can see you're built sturdy," Caleb said flatly. "So what? Your ma was the same from what I heard. She bore 6 children and buried 3 before your pa lost her to fever. She worked hard and she endured. That's frontier stock, that is. Nothing to be ashamed of. But I eat too much, they say. I take more than my share. Horse shit." The crude word made Martha's eyes widen. Caleb's expression was fierce now, the mountain man's calm replaced by something harder. "Begging your pardon, but that's pure horse shit, and those women know it. I've watched you, Martha. You take one plate at the common meals, same as everyone. You work from dawn to dusk. Your garden plot produces more vegetables than most because you're out there every day doing the work. You ain't taken from anyone. You're just built the way you're built, and there's not a damn thing wrong with that." Martha felt something crack open inside her chest again, but this time it wasn't breaking. It was opening, letting in light she'd forgotten could exist. "Why do you care?" she whispered. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his knife stilling against the wood. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it before. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for things you can't change. I'm a half-breed, Martha. Ma was Cherokee, Pa was a Scots trader. Neither side wanted me much once they were both gone. Learned early that people will find reasons to push you out if you're different from what they think you ought to be. Learned, too, that the opinion of small-minded folks ain't worth the breath it takes to speak it." "I never knew," Martha said. "Most folks don't look close enough to see it. The beard hides Ma's cheekbones, and I'm tall like Pa was. Easy to pass if you know how." He met her eyes across the fire. "But I shouldn't have to pass, and you shouldn't have to apologize for taking up space in the world. We're all just trying to survive out here. Anyone who can't see that ain't worth your tears." Something shifted in Martha then, some fundamental reordering of how she understood herself and her place in the world. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt seen, not judged, not measured against some impossible standard, just seen as a person with her own worth and dignity. "Thank you," she said quietly. Caleb nodded and went back to his carving. "You're welcome. Now, when you're ready, I'll walk you back to your pa's cabin. Folk can think what they want, but you ain't walking alone in this snow." Winter deepened, and with it came changes Martha hadn't anticipated. Caleb Morgan, having made his position clear, didn't waver from it. When the women of the settlement whispered, he ignored them with the same indifference he showed to black flies in summer. When Sarah Carmichael tried once more to catch his attention, batting her eyelashes and pressing close with some pretended need for help, he treated her with polite disinterest that bordered on dismissal. And when Martha carried water or wood or worked in her garden plot, Caleb would appear not hovering, not making a show of it, but simply there, lending a hand with the heavier work, sharing whatever game he'd caught, talking with her in that quiet, easy way he had. People noticed, of course. A settlement of 30 families had little else to do but notice things. "What's that mountain man doing sniffing around the Hensley girl?" Martha heard Mrs. Pritchard ask her husband one morning at the trading post. "Maybe he sees something you don't," Mr. Pritchard replied, his tone dry. "Man survived 10 years alone in the wilderness. Reckon he knows how to judge what's valuable and what's just pretty paint." Martha, hidden behind a shelf of dry goods, pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from laughing or crying, she wasn't sure which. As winter gave way to early spring, Caleb began teaching Martha things: how to read sign in the forest, how to move quietly, how to find food where others saw only empty woods. He taught her, as he might teach anyone, no condescension, no special allowances, just straightforward instruction and patient correction when she made mistakes. "You're good at this," he said one afternoon as they returned from checking rabbit snares. "Got a feel for the woods." Martha flushed with pleasure. "My mother used to take me foraging when I was small. I'd forgotten how much I loved it." "Shouldn't forget things that bring you joy," Caleb said. "Life's too short and too hard for that." They walked in comfortable silence for a while before Martha found the courage to ask the question that had been building in her for weeks. "Why did you really stay here, Caleb? It's not just about wintering over, is it?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "No, I reckon it's not. Truth is, I'm tired, Martha. Tired of wandering, tired of being alone, tired of living like I've got nothing to lose because I've got nothing to keep. Been thinking maybe it's time to put down roots somewhere, build something that lasts." "Here?" Martha's voice was skeptical. "In Harlan's Ridge?" "Maybe, or maybe somewhere close by. There's good land in these mountains, good hunting, good water. A man could build a life here." He glanced at her, something uncertain in his expression, the first uncertainty she'd seen from him. If he had reason to. Martha's heart began to beat faster. What kind of reason? Caleb stopped walking. They were alone on the path, the settlement still a mile distant, the forest close and quiet around them. The kind of reason that makes a house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. The kind that makes a man want to build something bigger than himself. "Caleb," Martha's voice caught. "I know it's probably too soon," he continued, the words coming faster now, as if he'd been holding them back and they were finally breaking free. "And I know I'm not much to look at, and I'm twice as old as you are, and I've got nothing to offer but hard work and whatever I can build with my own hands. But, Martha, I've been alone my whole life, and then I came here and I really saw you, the way you work, the way you endure, the strength in you, and I thought maybe, if you were willing, we could be alone together, build something, make a life worth living." Martha couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this man who'd somehow seen past everything she thought made her unworthy and found something worth keeping. "I'm not," she started, then stopped, made herself say it honestly. "I'm not what men want, Caleb. I'm not pretty or small or delicate. I'm just—" "You're strong," Caleb interrupted. "You're kind. You're capable. You've got a good heart and a steady spirit, and you don't quit even when the world's kicking you. That's what I want, Martha. That's what I need. Someone who won't break when life gets hard, because life's always hard, and I'm tired of facing it alone." You truly mean that?" It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "Every word. And I'll prove it to you if you'll let me, however long it takes." Martha thought about her life, the loneliness, the shame, the constant feeling of being less than what she should be. Then she thought about this man, this strange, quiet mountain man who'd looked at her and seen someone worth knowing. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll let you." Caleb's smile transformed his face, making him almost handsome. "Then I reckon we've got work to do. Can't court a woman properly without having something to offer her." True to his word, Caleb set to work. He filed a land claim on a piece of property 3 miles east of the settlement, good flat land near a creek, backed by a forest rich with game. He built a cabin with his own hands, cutting and notching logs with patient precision, thinking each board and beam through before setting it in place. Martha came to watch sometimes, bringing food, offering help where she could. They talked as they worked long conversations about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories, each other's dreams. "My ma used to say that love wasn't a feeling, it was a decision," Caleb said one afternoon as they chinked gaps between logs with clay and moss. "Said feelings come and go like weather, but decision, that's what lasts. That's what builds a life." "Is that what this is?" Martha asked. "A decision?" "Started that way," Caleb admitted, "but somewhere along the line, the feelings caught up. Now, it's both." He looked at her seriously. "What about you, Martha? You deciding, or you feeling, or both?" Martha thought about it, really thought about it. "Both," she said finally. "I decided to trust you that first day when you didn't let me freeze in the snow, but the feeling that came slower like spring thaw sneaked up on me while I wasn't looking. Now I can't imagine not having you around." "Good," Caleb said with satisfaction. "That's real good." The settlement watched their courtship with varying degrees of skepticism, curiosity, and grudging acceptance. Samuel Harlan, pragmatic as always, approved Caleb was useful, hard-working, and clearly serious about staying. Some of the women who'd been cruel to Martha had the grace to look ashamed. Others, like Mrs. Pritchard, maintained their righteous disapproval, but found fewer listeners willing to engage with it. Sarah Carmichael tried once more to change Caleb's mind, cornering him at the trading post with tears and protestations that Martha wasn't right for him, that he deserved someone prettier, younger, better. Better? Caleb's voice was cold enough to freeze water. "Martha Hensley works harder than any 3 women in this settlement. She's honest, capable, and kinder than most folks deserve, given how they've treated her. You call that not good enough?" Sarah flushed red. "I only meant, I know what you meant." And the answer's no. Was no the first time you asked? Still no now? Always going to be no. I've made my choice and I'm happy with it. You'd do well to make your peace with that. Word of the exchange spread through the settlement within hours. Martha heard about it from 3 different sources before sunset, each telling slightly different versions, but all agreeing on the essential facts. Caleb Morgan had chosen her, definitively and publicly, and he wasn't going to be moved. That night, Martha lay in her narrow bed in her father's cabin and let herself cry again. But these were different tears, tears of relief and joy, and a gratitude so profound it ached in her bones. By late spring, the cabin was finished, a sturdy structure of notched logs with a stone fireplace, real glass windows traded from a passing merchant, and a loft large enough for future children. Caleb had built furniture too, A table, chairs, a bed frame, waiting for a mattress Martha was sewing from ticking and stuffed with straw and cattail down. "It's beautiful," Martha breathed the first time she saw it complete, standing in the doorway with Caleb beside her. "It's home," Caleb corrected, "or it will be, once you're in it." They married on a warm June morning, the ceremony performed by Samuel Harlan in his capacity as settlement magistrate. Martha wore a dress she'd sewn herself from cloth Caleb had bought blue as a summer sky, fitted to her frame without apology or attempt to hide her size. Caleb wore new buckskins he'd tanned and sewn, his hair neatly braided, his beard freshly trimmed. Most of the settlement attended, some out of genuine goodwill, others from simple curiosity. Martha didn't care either way. She stood beside Caleb and spoke her vows clearly, without shame or hesitation, claiming her happiness with both hands. When Harlan pronounced them married, Caleb kissed her in front of everyone, a brief, firm press of lips that still managed to make Martha's toes curl in her boots. "Well then," Caleb said, grinning at her flushed face, "reckon we should head home, Mrs. Morgan." "Mrs. Morgan." Martha tested the name silently, finding it fit better than her own skin ever had. They walked back to their cabin hand in hand, leaving the settlement and its opinions behind. The future stretched before them, uncertain and challenging, as frontier life always was, but they would face it together. The years that followed were hard, as all frontier years were hard, but they were good too. Martha and Caleb worked their land together, building not just a homestead, but a life that felt solid and real. They cleared fields, planted crops, raised chickens and pigs, and eventually a cow. They hunted and gathered and preserved food for the winter. They built furniture and tools and all the thousand small things a household needed. And they talked long conversations by firelight in winter, working conversations as they labored side by side in summer. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's silences, each other's ways of being in the world. Their first child came 2 years after their marriage, a boy they named Jacob, who had his father's dark eyes and his mother's steady temperament. Martha's pregnancy had terrified her, at first afraid her size would cause problems, afraid the settlement women would find new reasons to whisper. But Caleb had been unshakably confident. "You're built for this," he'd told her, his large hand spanning her swollen belly. "Strong bones, strong body, strong heart. Our boy couldn't ask for a better ma." He'd been right. The birth was hard, but not unusually so, and Jacob emerged healthy and howling, clearly unimpressed with the world, but ready to take it on regardless. 2 years later came Abigail, tiny and fierce, with Martha's light brown hair and Caleb's stubborn chin. Then Samuel, named for the man who'd given them their marriage vows and who'd become a true friend. Then Ruth, sweet-tempered and gentle, born in the middle of a spring storm that matched the violence of her entry into the world with the peace she brought after. The cabin expanded with each child rooms added, a true second story built, windows overlooking the creek and the mountains beyond. What had started as a simple shelter became a home in truth, filled with the noise and chaos and love of a growing family. Martha's father, sobered by age and loneliness, eventually made his peace with his daughter's choice. He moved into a small addition Caleb built onto the cabin, spending his last years watching his grandchildren play and perhaps understanding, finally, what he'd failed to see in his daughter all those years before. The settlement changed, too. growing larger, more established, less inclined to the small cruelties that had once defined it. New families arrived, bringing fresh perspectives and different ways of seeing the world. Some of the old families moved on, chasing newer frontiers. Life flowed and shifted like a river, and Martha and Caleb's place in it grew more secure with each passing season. Sarah Carmichael married a trader who passed through one spring, moving east to Philadelphia and a life more suited to her temperament. Mrs. Pritchard, confronted by her own grown daughter's unhappy marriage to a man she thought suitable, grew quieter in her judgments. People learned, or they didn't, or they left. The world turned regardless. On their 10th anniversary, Caleb and Martha stood together on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the mountains while their children played in the yard. "You ever regret it?" Martha asked, slipping her hand into his. "Settling down, I mean, giving up the wandering life." Caleb squeezed her fingers, his weathered face peaceful in the fading light. "Not for a single day. This," he gestured at the cabin, the children, the land spread out before them, "this is what I was looking for all those years I was wandering. Just didn't know it till I found you." "I was so broken that day you found me crying," Martha said softly. "So sure I wasn't worth anything, that no one would ever want me." "You were never broken," Caleb corrected gently. "Just bent underweight you shouldn't have been carrying. And as for worth, Martha, you're worth more than all the gold in all the mountains. You're worth everything." Martha leaned against him, solid and real and present. "We built something good here, didn't we?" "We built something lasting," Caleb agreed. "Something that'll outlive us both if we're lucky and if we keep working at it." "Then I suppose we'd better keep working," Martha said with a smile. "I suppose we better," Caleb replied, kissing the top of her head. "Together, like always." The sun set. The stars came out. The children were called inside for supper, protesting, but coming nonetheless. Another day ended on the Morgan homestead, and another would begin tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. The cycle of life continuing, not perfect but good enough, built on the foundation of two people who'd chosen each other when the world said they shouldn't, who'd built a life together from nothing but determination and love and the simple refusal to believe that happiness was something other people deserved, but they did not. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.